Good morning to you. I am Mark Sutter with HurricaneTrack here. It is the 27th of June, 2024. Happy Thursday to you. Webcam's not working today for whatever reason, so we'll go without seeing me, which is just fine. We have a lot to talk about here related to this headline. Not a good sign what we're seeing out here. This area right here in red, yeah, that's a very bad sign for what's coming the rest of the season. We got to talk frankly about this. Can't sugarcoat it and say, oh, everything's going to be okay. Maybe it won't, and we need to be ready, and we need to be prepared, and we need to face the facts that this right here, these very warm anomalies here in the deep tropics, that is leading to what we are seeing with our area of interest out here. We've been talking about this for months, and now we're starting to see the results of this very warm pattern in the tropical Atlantic and elsewhere. And then added to that, this developing La Nina situation, probably going to be a weak La Nina, and that is going to be pretty much the stage being set for a very active hurricane season, and we are seeing that now with what's going on here in the tropics. So let me set up this animation real quick. Since we've got enough frames into daylight, especially over the eastern part of the western hemisphere, there we go, that's much better. So the two areas that we're watching right now, let's use sky blue today. We'll be a little bit optimistic. There's our first area, that is 94L. Yeah, a little bit of deep convection associated with it. We'll talk about that too as we go on. We're not going to ignore that feature. But this is the one that everybody's really talking about, and for good reason. We normally do not see development way out in the deep tropics like this. And no, it hasn't developed yet, but that's a very vigorous tropical wave, deep organized convection starting to bubble up with this system, and it's going to make its way off to the west and west-northwest with time. And we're going to have to really watch this over here in the islands, Barbados, pretty much anywhere in the Lesser Antilles. Hard to say where it would impact. We'll talk about impacts in just a little bit. But we've got one, and then we have two, and then really a third system moving off Africa now. And this is quite unusual to see during June. And even though we're in the latter part of June, it's not the latter part of August. And that is what is so important here, to understand that we are not in the climatological peak of hurricane season, yet we're seeing a fairly active tropical wave train coming off Africa, moving across the Atlantic with unusually favorable conditions, literally what the Hurricane Center said in their outlook last night, and we have to see what happens. We're going to have to start thinking impacts here earlier than we are used to seeing, especially in the longer scheme of things, like the last 30 years or so. No, this is not something typical. 2005, we had something similar. 2017, 1933, that's a long time ago, obviously well beyond 30 years. But yes, this is unusual, and we need to address it. So here's the National Hurricane Center stance on everything. This is 94L, and I do like that they mention the invest numbers now in the tropical weather outlook. 30% chance of further development over the next few days, and then our system over here, 95L, up to 70%, and these are the different track potential areas and whatnot, just like we have over here on our thumbnail graphic for today. And if we look at this, very, very, again, unusual to see environmental conditions this conducive, this early, that far east. I mean, if you've been tracking storms long enough, you don't usually see that. Maybe over in this area, certainly in this area, things are more favorable. And then a lot of times up here in the subtropics with fronts that move off and upper level lows, or even once in a while you get these big MCS clusters of thunderstorms, mesoscale convective systems that move off into the Gulf, and you can get development. Sometimes they come off the southeast. I'm thinking of Hurricane Arthur back in 2014, 10 years ago. That's where we typically see development, not out here in the deep tropics, and not like we're seeing now with potentially two of these systems. So let's get into the modeling just a little bit here. I think this is important to sort of understand where we're going with everything. First of all, again, as I mentioned yesterday, there is a lot of Saharan air layer out there. That's what this brown at least partially represents, the dry air in the atmosphere, low relative humidity. And then down here is our feature that we're watching, 95L. And all this green is deep tropical moisture. There's more of it over here in the Western Caribbean. So let's watch what happens when we move this out into time. That deep tropical moisture, at least according to the GFS, is enough for this system to get going at about 60 hours time frame, something like that, a fairly well-developed tropical storm, according to the GFS anyway. And then it strengthens, small in size, certainly, and heads towards the islands there by just about day 5, we could say, between days 4 and 5. And then what's very curious is we have another system right behind it, and even more moisture coming off Africa, more Saharan air getting ejected out into the Atlantic. So you've got these two competing things. Climatology, with all of this, is what we're normally supposed to see. Look at that big high up there, 1033 millibar high. Yeah, it should be dry and just barren out here during June and into the first part of July. But nature has a way of shaking things up. And it looks like we have a pretty good chance that we can have 1, maybe 2 tropical systems in the early part of July. Now, what about 94L? It moves in over Central America, bringing a lot of heavy rain. Probably not going to be a threat to the lower 48 at all, but something to watch. Let's rewind it a little bit, and let's at least point out there's 94L right there. And again, that looks like it's going to move right into Central America, and all that deep green, that's a lot of heavy rain, and some of that moisture might make its way, the northern part of that envelope, into southern Texas, and eventually working its way into the desert southwest of the United States around the big old high sitting over the eastern part of North America. Now look, this is a different way, if I can get it to work, of looking at things. This is the upper level pattern. This too, kind of unusual for this time of the hurricane season. This is 200 millibars in the atmosphere, so you're way up there where the jet planes fly and that kind of thing, what we call the outflow level. And look at this. There's our low. This is the initial position. There's our surface low. But look at the upper levels. Very diffluent aloft. That is just ideal. You're not seeing this right here. That's your tropical upper tropospheric trough, or at least one of them, a little tut low. Well, not quite a low, but a trough there. There's another tut trough right there, tropical upper tropospheric troughing. Those are negative because you've got the shear on this side of it. And then, same thing over here. The shear comes around like that. Strong upper level winds out of the southwest. But look at our feature here, 95L, surrounded by and encompassed by very favorable upper level winds. So the question is, does that pattern hold as the system moves west? And it looks like it does. That diffluent flow where the air is spreading out in the upper levels goes right along with that system as it works its way into the Caribbean. You see that? So a very favorable pattern, at least according to the GFS. Now, is it going to be right? Hey, look, I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. But the other models are also fairly consistent with development. All right? This is the Euro. This is a different area of the atmosphere. We're looking at the mean sea level pressures. That's right down at the ocean, roughly. And the 10 meter wind speed, about 35 feet, 33, 35 feet, whatever it is, above the surface of the Earth, 10 meters. So where are we watching? We're watching right here. And then notice over here, you don't really see it, but that's where 94L is located. Don't want to ignore it completely, but I think the bigger attention is going to be placed on 95L, and for good reason. So the Euro, not quite as aggressive, but it does develop the system. Looking at just the pressures alone, yeah, that'd be a tropical depression, maybe a weak tropical storm. Quite the juxtaposition to the GFS, which is much more aggressive. And again, just notice what's happening here. This huge, sprawling surface high dominating the Atlantic, 1033 millibars. But down here, because of that very warm water, the pressures are just a little lower than they should be. And those trades really aren't screaming across here. It's just right. It's almost like that Goldilocks zone that we hear about, right? Planetary evolution, that's a big thing. The comfort zone for whatever. It's a good metaphor, and it works here that, despite this very strong high, which would normally just blast dry, dusty air out into the Atlantic, we've got potentially a couple of systems here developing on the extreme southern side of that strong Bermuda Azores high out there. And furthermore, I want to show you this. This is important. I wish my webcam worked because I like talking to you, not just at you. But over at the Tropical Tidbits page, we do have this nice section where the current storms are located. There's 94L. Again, didn't want to just completely ignore this. Pretty deep showers and thunderstorms with it, or what we call convection, heading towards parts of the Western Caribbean, eventually into Central America. But it doesn't look like, what did I do? I guess I messed that up. Let's go back to the old tidbits here. It doesn't look like this system is going to do too much. There's some of the ensembles for you there, again, heading right into Central America. And, yeah, no, if I close it now, we go back. And even the ship's guidance, and others, the model intensity, not very bullish overall. Ships there, the statistical hurricane intensity prediction, yeah, it does make it a tropical storm, but I think it's overdoing it. We shall see, right? Now, if we go back to this, let's look at 95L, and this is way more interesting, obviously. There are some of the tracks for you, tightly clustered. That's very interesting to see what a tight envelope that is. You don't have a bunch up here and over here and like that. Pretty tightly clustered area of models there. And they're not a lot of them being run just yet because it's still early in the process. But overall, it looks like a general west-northwest track towards the islands here. So you folks there definitely going to want to be paying attention to this. And then the other part that I want to show you, let's make sure we get everything, let's get rid of that, go to here, is the intensity guidance. Now this is very eye-opening, all right? So the H-Wharf, hopefully, out on a island of its own there, getting up to Cat 4, that would just be unacceptable. But look at the rest of the guidance, the overall envelope here. Let's use this blue color to outline everything. This is what I want your eye to be drawn to, is the overall guidance envelope is generally up, and most of it into the Category 1 hurricane realm, right? See, I mean, some of it's not, but a lot of it is, and even stronger than that. So the consensus of the intensity guidance is for this to strengthen. So when you look at something like the GFS back over here, that was pretty aggressive with this system, getting it down to 970, the rest of the modeling here, and these are all the different ones, that's the intensity consensus. There's a lot of them sitting in here, and there's more added every year, it seems. But you can see as well as I do, there's your hurricane threshold right there, and how many of them are in there. There's a reason for that, and it is because of the very favorable conditions sitting out here, going back to this, and that is the number one culprit. Let's use black mark so it'll pan out a little bit, stand out a little bit better. That's why, all right? So that's very interesting to me, that the overall consensus, you don't have just one model way out in la-la land. H-Wharf hopefully is, but everything else is pretty much in line for steady strengthening as this system moves towards the west and west-northwest. And you know the other interesting thing about this, I'm going to go back to this one more time. We normally say, oh, it'll be moving towards warmer water. Well, it's already in warmer water, and, it just doesn't get much more favorable than that. So, yeah, I think the guidance is potentially onto something. It certainly makes sense to me. Now, what about the lower 48 over here? People are very interested in that. Beyond the impacts to the islands, which there could be in a few days. You guys need to be watching that. Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago, those areas south and west of there. The windwards probably would take the brunt of this, but it's hard to know for sure. Beyond that time, the overall pattern suggests, and we're looking at the height anomalies in the atmosphere, so this is the steering level, basically very strong high pressure all across pretty much everything. So first of all, it's going to be very hot over the southeast and the eastern U.S., and that keeps these systems shoved down to the south. It's just pretty simple. And that pattern looks like it's going to stick around. Let's just take this out to 168 hours. Just not enough weakness And these are your anomalies, your height anomalies. That's what this shows. But even the overall height lines themselves, 591 down here, that's enough to keep this shoved down into the Caribbean. We're not seeing what we call height falls, a big trough out here, dipping down enough to pull this north towards the northern leewards probably, and probably not towards Puerto Rico. So I'm inclined to believe, and everybody I think that looking at this is in the same camp, that this system will track into the Caribbean over the next week or so. Beyond that time, it's just too hard to know. It is. There's too many variables. The way the steering currents could unfold, we'll just have to wait and see. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. This is what the steering pattern looks like over the next week or so. So the first area that we're going to really pay attention to, of course, is the Lesser Antilles, and specifically our friends down there in the Windward Islands. We're going to need to watch this very, very closely. Now let's kill some of these tabs and get to this. This, folks, is why I am in Deadwood, South Dakota. And today will be maybe the next to last day of trying to get out here and capture hail. And boy, it's looking really gnarly up here. Can't believe I'm saying this, in Montana and North Dakota. So this will be my target area. A good friend of our project, Mr. Scott Finney, is flying out as we speak from Dallas into Rapid City. After I'm done with this, I got to go pick him up. And then we have the long drive up here into the red zone to try to get some massive hail, study it, measure it, weigh it, document it, understand it better. Very fascinated by hail. I may be a hurricane guy, but hey, all kinds of weather to me is interesting. And there's something about hail and how dynamic it is. But that's the severe threat for today. The tornado threat is not zero either, so we got to pay attention to that. This is today, this is tomorrow. I was hoping to wrap things up after today, but tomorrow is a little bit of an intriguing setup right here, and that's not too far. We're going to stay over in Gillette, Wyoming tonight, so we could probably get down to this area tomorrow, and then that should do it, because the day 3 outlook, things start to calm down, and I got to head home and get ready for hurricane season, because, yeah, something might be coming. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, but I got to make sure I'm not sitting out here and something sneaks in and I'm not ready for it. Absolutely. All right, bummer that the webcam's not working, but at least I could do an update for you today. Voice is a little grovelly this morning because it's only 7:30 out here in Deadwood. Frickin' sun comes up at 5:30, shining in the window, and so I woke up early, which is good. I got to get my day going, and we got a lot to do today. But there's the outlook and discussion from yours truly. I appreciate you tuning in. I am Mark Sutherland from all of us at HurricaneTrack, our wonderful community out there. We appreciate you watching. I will have more for you absolutely tomorrow morning.